The last will and testament of the deceased, Thomas Wayne. In the event of my death, I hereby declare that all my worldly possessions pass to my son, Bruce Wayne. Do not be frivolous with this wealth. Please do not waste it all on fast cars.
Stop on it!
This is how it happened. This is how the Batman died.
Howdy folks, I'm a completely new and original character, and today I'll be talking about the hit 2015 video game, Batman Arkham Knight, which was developed by Rocksteady and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. This is the final installment in my Rocksteady Arkhamverse review series, so if you're curious about my thoughts on the other games, why not check out the other videos first? Please note that this review will contain spoilers from the previous games in the franchise, even for Origins, which I have not covered yet. Now, the version that I have chosen to review is the PS4 version that I played on my PS5. Which means that some gameplay and cutscenes that I'll show later had to be sourced from other videos because the PS5 blocked me from recording them. Quick little sidetrack, but if I bought a game, I should be allowed to record every bit of it. It's kinda ridiculous, I think. But with that said, my copy ran relatively smoothly, with the occasional glitch here and at least one crash there. But hey, it still ran better than the PC version did at release. So, to begin with our tale on how Batman died, we need to talk about how he began. Shortly after the release of Arkham City, Rocksteady would begin steady development of the game. In 2013, Warner Bros. Montreal would release Arkham Origins, which helped make the wait in between the Rocksteady installments more bearable. In 2014, the game would be announced, and in 2015, it would be released on the latest generations of hardware, leaving behind the 7th generation of consoles. After over 4 years in development, Arkham Knight would be met with favorable reviews, being met with mostly 9 out of 10s by most major outlets. Much praise would be lauded to the game's attention to detail and its variety of gameplay, although narrative elements such as character writing and story would be met with much more divisive thoughts. But with all that said, what exactly is this game all about? Well, similar to Arkham Asylum and City, Knight is a third-person action-adventure open-world stealth puzzle brawler with a huge emphasis on car racing and tank combat. Basically, it's a lot of things all at once. In this game, you play as Batman, and some of his henchmen as you take on a colorful cast of deranged serial killers, arsonists, crime bosses, and other assorted weirdos. Along with that, you have access to the most gadgets and equipment Batman has ever had in these games, and you get one seriously tricked out ride. Out of the entire trilogy, I would say that it has the most to do gameplay-wise, but more isn't always better, I feel. But before I get into that, let's get into what the general premise of the game is first. The game begins with our good friend Joker having his corpse cremated, and thank God for that because I was sick of the guy. After that, we hear Commissioner Jim Gordon tell us that this is the story of how the Batman died. Which is kind of a spoiler, dude. Kinda rude. We then cut to a diner where we go first person as a cop, and we are told by a snitch that some guy in the back is smoking up a store. Upon confronting this individual, we are met with a terrible ghoul. Soon the entire diner is full of monsters beating each other up. I guess this cop bit off more than he could chew. What happens next is that the infamous and previously presumed dead criminal Scarecrow shows up, sporting a new look, voice, and attitude that basically makes him a completely different character from Asylum. But don't worry, they are completely the same. Who needs Paul Dini to write anyways? The Scarecrow then announces to Gotham that he plans on crop dusting the entire city with an unhealthy dose of fear gas, and soon every single civilian evacuates in less than a day. Like 5 million people or something. Which means you don't gotta worry about running over civilians. How convenient. Now all that remains is Batman, who must stop the Scarecrow and his massive army that has suddenly arrived, alongside all of the other supervillains and goons that have gotten in on this Royal Rumble. Among this rogues gallery is a completely new adversary for the Batman, the Arkham Knight. This strange, enigmatic, and totally new character seems to know everything about Batman and will stop at nothing to kill him. Who could he possibly be?
Who is doing this? Such a lust for revenge? Who?
Well, Batman's gotta figure that out. And by Batman, I mean you. You're Batman. This is like the third time you should know this by now. Anyways, let's talk a bit about these kooky, crazy characters and their amazing voice actors. To start, we have the late Kevin Conroy returning once again to voice the Caped Crusader. And this time I would say that it's his most emotional role of the character. The Batman has a wide range of emotions now, besides just brooding. He even starts to show a more humorous side that comes out when talking to folks like Nightwing, Scott Porter, and Catwoman, Grey DeLisle. I really enjoy the banter that Batman and Catwoman has throughout the game, and it makes the Riddler missions just a little less frustrating. Our primary antagonist, the Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight, are played by John Noble and Troy Baker respectively. Of the two, I would say that Noble's performance of Scarecrow was my most favorite. He has a calm demeanor with a sense of malice just pooling beneath. When compared to the Arkham Knight, there's a rather interesting contrast. He's brutal, angry, and pretty gosh darn edgy, which can get kind of old after a while. And since it took me closer to over 20 more hours to beat the game, I had to hear him a lot. But anyways, it's like a master and apprentice feeling sort of relationship, with Scarecrow attempting to rein the hot-headed youth in so that he doesn't accidentally sabotage any plans. When talking about the Arkham Knight, I will say that I do like his design. It's a fun merging of military chic with sci-fi tech that really stands out. And once again, there's a contrast with the Scarecrow, who's gaunt, frail, and tattered. Almost like a passing of the torch between the old villainy and the new. Kinda like how they kept switching voice actors between games. Actually, I want to talk about that for a moment. I thought that it was rather strange that they didn't bring back Dino Andrade to voice the Scarecrow, and that he's now basically an entirely different character. Expanding upon the voice actor conundrum, I want to note that many of the characters in this game have had their voice actors replaced from the previous games. For instance, for both Asylum and City, Oracle is voiced by Kimberly Brooks, but was replaced by Ashley Greene in Night. Then there's Robin, who was voiced by Troy Baker in City, and then replaced by Matthew Mercer in Night. And finally, Commissioner Gordon, who has had 3 separate voice actors across the 3 games: Tom Kane, David Kay, and Jonathan Banks. Now look, I think that these folks were all fantastic. I'm not complaining about their voice acting work. I just think it's kinda weird how Rocksteady can't seem to be consistent with these side characters. I feel like consistency is one of those things that Knight really struggles with. Like with the gameplay, for instance. Now, the gameplay itself is fun. You still have the rhythm-based brawler combat, but it also has changes to it that are small that trip me up. The button configurations for how to detonate the explosive gel have changed, and entering and exiting grates has different controls now, and environmental takedowns are just sort of thrown in there without a proper tutorial. It's not a huge problem, but for many of these changes, I just don't see a purpose. Unless it was to facilitate the new big toy that you get. Because guess what? Your superhero beat-em-up stealth action game is now a tank combat and racing game as well. But more on that main selling point a bit later. Many enemy types from the previous games appear, from knife guys to shield guys to baton guys and gun guys, but you also got some new guys sprinkled around. Meet the medic. No, not that one. He's a particularly nasty enemy that you'll want to take out quick, as obviously by his namesake, he can revive downed enemies. Luckily, Batman doesn't follow the Geneva Convention, so feel free to punch the ever-loving crap out of these guys. We then have enemies with items that can control drones that will zap you and alert other enemies. Luckily, you can hack these drones and have them fight for you. This was not sponsored by the US military. I think the final enemies that I want to really highlight are the big guys.
You're a big guy.
For you.
These are dudes who are larger than your average bear and hit twice as hard. They also come in different flavors, from blades to electricity to shields and even freaking miniguns. Be careful when taking them on. I found that if your environment has environmental takedowns, you should save them for those big guys. Unless you try to do so and accidentally target some shrimpy goon at the last second. That's happened to me multiple times. I also hope you enjoy having increasingly more and more complex enemy encounters, because as the game goes on, the amount of dudes and the types present at the same time will increase. I'm gonna be honest, I got so tired from fighting that I eventually just switched to easy mode. It took me 35 hours to beat the game, and I didn't even get all the Riddler challenges done. It was a war of attrition and I clearly lost. But something that I didn't get tired of was stealth, which is just as engaging as always. What I really enjoyed is if you use the same spot to stealth enemies repeatedly, they'll begin laying down traps for you, meaning that you'll need to change up your tactics. I'm glad that this was something that they really expanded upon from the previous games. But you know, I kind of felt like I just repeated myself from my other videos by talking about combat and stealth. Let's talk about the car now instead. In this game, you finally get to drive the Batmobile. And you know what? It's alright. It's strange. The car is the biggest selling point for the game, and it's the part that I'm sort of the most meh on. On one hand, it can be fun to run people over non-lethally with your super tricked out ride. But on the other hand, I honestly enjoyed it more when I could just grapple up a building and glide around the city. I found that the car could be a bit difficult to handle at times, especially when taking sharp turns. I'm sure part of that is I was probably not doing some sort of drift maneuver right. But at the same time, the controls felt slow to me. Like, I would hold down to turn and there was a delay before my Batmobile could turn. And then there's the tank. Now, Rocksteady has done a great job at creating the visual aspects of the tank. It's unique and I would even say iconic. It's like the Nolan design, but they decided to make it much more traversable. What I really like is that I can just drive around and cause untold amounts of property damage with it. But don't worry, I'll pay for it with my Bat credit card.
They had the balls to give one of the greatest superheroes of all time a Bat credit card!
And yet, the parts where I have to fight fortunately unmanned drones with it are also some of the most boring in the game. You'd think tank combat would be fun, but a lot of it is just me holding down the left trigger, pressing X to dodge a shot, and then pressing the right trigger to shoot a robot. Don't get me wrong, the explosions are pretty cool, but it's a gameplay loop that just doesn't have much room for variation. Sure, you get drone hacking, missiles, and an EMP, but those still got old after 35 hours. At least give me more weapons for the tank besides just a cannon and a machine gun. Give me something like chain lightning or mines that I can deploy. What I'm saying is, they should have went nuts with all the possibilities. The drones are unmanned, so the no killing rule wasn't an excuse for the lack of weapon types. It almost felt like somebody at Rocksteady really wanted to show off his concept for a tank game, but it could only do so if it was shoved into another Batman game. It just never really stuck for me, and I think that's a shame. But something that I really appreciated was the detective work that you could do. I really liked how they've expanded detective vision in this game for side quests. There's an addition of the deep tissue scanner that shows you some neat, gnarly secrets in corpses, or crime scene reconstruction and surveillance camera analysis. This game really emphasizes the detective side of Batman more than ever, and I like it a lot. And then you have the Riddler challenges returning. Look, I'm not gonna complain too much about the Riddler. He's got a lot of challenges and trophies in this game, but luckily it's less than what Arkham City had. There are some neat challenges you can do that incorporate the use of both Batman and his car at the same time that are pretty intuitive. while other puzzles just made little to no sense to me. And then there's the puzzle racing. For the Riddler's main quest line, you have to do a series of challenges for him, or else he'll kill Catwoman. And some of these challenges involve racing against the clock in deadly races that you have to solve puzzles during. And these puzzles are just a single button press, but your timing and positioning play a crucial role in completing them. Unfortunately, I lack timing and positioning, and with the car's controls not agreeing with me, I never finished the last racing quest, meaning that I can't access the true ending of the game, because you have to do every single side quest in order to do so. Now look, I don't have problems with endings being unlocked through special means, and some of the side quests, or as the game refers to them as, most wanted missions, are pretty neat. For instance, there's a series of missions where you investigate a serial murderer by locating his victims via listening for opera music. It encourages map exploration, and then you get a pretty cool little crime scene investigation that you can do. Another one involves stopping the rogue arsonist Firefly, who is a welcome sight for Arkham Origins fans, from burning down fire stations, which is not a welcome sight. This involves chasing him down your Batmobile, which, given the controls, was a little frustrating at times, but it's still a really neat way to do a mission. But then you have missions like Own the Roads, where you have to dismantle checkpoints that are set up by the Scarecrow's militia. Now, if there were like 10 you had to do, I'd be okay with it, but throughout the story, you have to take on 20 different checkpoints of varying difficulty and complexity. Some are a breeze, others are tough as nails, but all of them got old after a while. And it's like that for just about every militia-related mission. It's just more of the same. Like, disarming a landmine involves fighting increasing hordes of drones with the gameplay of the Bat Tank changing very little, just repeated dodging and shooting. It's because of this that I highly recommend that you do the Season of Infamy DLC to break up the monotony a bit. These are quests that are specifically attached to certain Batman villains, such as the Mad Hatter or Mr. Freeze. They're bite-sized, short missions, and I'm honestly fine with that. They didn't overstay their welcome unlike the 15 firefighters that I had to save. Also note that there are DLC story packs outside of the main campaign, but I didn't get around to doing those. I might save them for another video sometime. But yeah, there's a lot of missions that just suffer from being either repetitive or underbaked, and the only way to spice up the campaign is with DLC, which feels a little to me now that I think about it. But besides doing all of these missions for fun, and for the full ending, what else do you get? Well, Batman Arkham Knight has a skill tree system that relies upon one or more skill points at a time to unlock new skills and abilities. Usually by completing a mission you'll receive 1 skill point, and upon completing all of one mission type you will receive 3 skill points. So while these missions are repetitive, they are almost essential to do if you want to keep up with the mounting threat of Scarecrow's forces. Of course, you also gain XP throughout the game as well, so you can level up your Bat Dude. But as time goes on, you'll need more and more XP, so be sure to do as many missions as you can, because some of your upgrades are especially useful, such as upgrades for the Disruptor, which can not only deactivate guns, but can also be upgraded to disable most special enemies like medics or trackers. Obviously, you can still play without them, but man, they just make things so much easier. Batman really needs to carry a bigger belt to hold all of these upgrades. Speaking of bigger, I wanted to talk a bit about Gotham itself for a moment. The map in Arkham Knight is estimated to be around 5 times larger than Arkham City, meaning that there are a lot of perches to brood on. The city itself is composed of 3 islands, Bleak, Miagani, and Founders. Each one does a good job of establishing its own identity, with Bleak appearing to be not as well off as the other 2 islands, hence the name, Miagani being the most modernized and yet gothic of the 3, and Founders being sorta boring since most of it has been under construction. Got kinda sick of that one real quick. What's interesting is that each island is gated off behind main story progression. What that means is that usually instead of advancing the plot, I'd instead do as many side missions as possible until I cleared most of the current island, and then progress narratively until I reached a new island. Each time major progress is made in the story, more side missions do appear as well, so in retrospect I could have just waited until the end and then cleared everything out. But I felt like the most Batman thing to do was to stamp out crime as soon as it showed up. Plus there's the whole needing to upgrade points to keep up with the mounting odds sort of thing. Looking back at Gotham City after playing other modern open world games like Spider-Man 2, I gotta say it feels sorta small. Now granted, Arkham Knight has extremely detailed graphics for the time, a hefty destruction and physics engine, and just generally had to be designed to best suit the Batmobile and AI tank drones. But part of me wishes that it was done differently. I would have liked it if Gotham was, well, all gothic while still keeping the New York-style giant screens. It's this reason that Miyagani is my favorite of the three islands. In fact, I kinda wonder if it helped inspire the 2022 film The Batman. There's some stuff there that looked familiar to me. I also noticed that there aren't as many seedy little alleyways as I was hoping for. That's something Arkham City really got right. And the disjointed nature of having Gotham be just three islands also got a bit tiring after a while. I kept thinking, instead of ocean, why not add more cool buildings that I can grapple and glide off of? And again, it probably would have been too much for the consoles at the time. Now, I will say that since the NDA lifted, I did try the Suicide Squad game, and it certainly seems to have lifted a few of my worries. It's definitely got a bigger city from what I can recall, but I'm pretty sure I still saw the island-style progression system in there. I guess time will tell once that game finally comes out. Moving on, let's talk about the art direction. Remember how I noted that Arkham City had some really detailed pores in my last video? Well, if you like those, then Arkham Knight has even more for you. The game is the most realistic we've ever seen, and criminals like Two-Face and Firefly are even nastier too. And you know what? I like it. Arkham City felt like a transition between cartoony and realistic, while Knight goes all in on the grit. It's admittedly the darkest in both tone, by being an M-rated game with decent amounts of visible blood and gunshot wounds, but also in how everything is presented. However, there are still bits of whimsy and comic booking. Okay, that ain't a real word, but you get what I mean. The drone enemies themselves appear to be a bit ridiculous, like they rolled off of the set of BattleBots, and the malicious soldiers all have bright red uniforms and goofy goggles to remind you that they are the bad guys. Plus, there's just everything going on with the big bladed guys and minigun dudes. And then you have Gotham itself, which I think is the most impressive looking part of the game. Gotham is large and industrial, ancient and yet modern. It all combines together into this place that looks unnatural in the day, but perfect at night. I just wish there was an option to disable the rain, because it made things kinda hard to see at times. I really wanted to admire all of the detailed work that was put into the game, as there was a lot of time and dedication that was put into it. It's fun to travel around and recognize certain landmarks, reminding you where you're at. There's a really cool giant Gothic building on Miyagani that's especially my favorite. I'm just a sucker for Gothic architecture. But overall, it's a good style. And although it will undoubtedly age more in the future, for right now, after close to 9 years, it's still keeping strong. The main artist credited for the game was David Higo, so I'm assuming that they were responsible for the strong style. In fact, they were the artists behind all 3 Rocksteady titles. So huge shout out to them and the team of modelers and level designers over at Rocksteady as well. Up next, the music. Now overall I would say that Arkham Knight has the strongest soundtrack in the franchise. Of course it borrows a lot of it from Arkham City, but hey, it's good so there's no harm. This time Ron Fish isn't around, but rather a new individual named David Buckley is helping out with Nick Arundel on composition. I'm also assuming that David might have had something to do with the new combat sounds in the game, which don't sound nearly as meaty. What they did to my explosive gel still hurts me. But that aside, great work all around. Up next, some of my own thoughts on all of this combined, and then we get to spoilers. Now, I know that I may have sounded a bit too critical throughout this review, but that's because I feel like this should be the ultimate Batman experience. A good chunk of his rogues gallery is here. There's tons of enemy types, the combat is fluid, you got the freaking Batmobile. This is supposed to be the end of the line, where everything Rocksteady has learned over the span of roughly 6 years comes to a head. And mashed all together, it feels disjointed. Like some parts just had more thought put into them than others. The combat still flows well, the city exploration is decent, and the music is just top tier. But then you have weird changes to how some gadgets work, the controls of the Batmobile not being as refined as they should be, and honestly just an absolutely massive amount of repetition that most side quests have. I feel like this is also partially my fault. I put a lot of expectations onto this game now, just like when I played it back then. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted this to be the final chapter, to have those same fond memories that Asylum and City brought me. I wanted to be the Batman, you know, the rich dude part, not the dead parents part. It's like one of those reasons why Valve never made Half-Life 3. Whatever they do could never meet the expectations that fans have in their minds. But man, I wish this game had some Valve writing. Okay, this is the quick spoiler part of the video. I'll be talking about some big plot details here, so if you don't want to listen to any of that, and just want to skip ahead, then go here. Alright, they're gone. Time to reveal my secret identity. Yeah, big surprise, I'm that guy you've seen in all of my other videos. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Well, two elephants. First off, remember when I said that the Joker's body was cremated? Well, you would take it as a sign that this is an important moment that symbolizes an important change coming to Gotham, that with the Joker dead, someone new would arise to strike terror. And then Scarecrow shows up and you're like, yeah, there he is, the antagonist. And then the Arkham Knight shows up and you think, alright, we got ourselves a new rival. And then you find out that the Batman has Joker cooties, or like a bloodborne Joker disease that's somehow slowly turning him into the Joker. Who the hell wrote this script? Basically, in Arkham City, the Joker had sent out bags of his Titan-infected blood across all of Gotham's hospitals and blood banks. Now, Titan is supposed to make you into a big scary monster, or so I thought, but for some reason in Joker's blood it just sorta slowly kills you. That's a point I should have addressed in the last video, but nostalgia was seriously getting in the way. So yeah, Batman was infected with the Joker's blood in City, and even though he took an antidote for it, it still infected him with Jokeritis. Oh, and it causes him to hallucinate that the Joker is with him? Now the part I'm still confused on is, how does a blood transfusion download an entire personality into someone? The answer? It's comic book science. But it's just so weird because these games are going in this gritty direction now, with big stakes and everything. And suddenly after huffing fear gas, we got a not so dynamic duo for most of our game. I will say that it was nice that Mark Hamill came back, but there's something that feels slightly off about his performance. Like his writing doesn't feel as punchy as it did in the other games. I really do think that looking closely at the story, you can feel Denny's absence, and it hurts it with the other plot points as well. But do note that even with my griping, the final sequence with the Joker in this game is actually fantastic, and I am hoping beyond hope that this is the final time that we see him. But you know, even with my Joker thoughts, they don't even come close to the overall disappointment I feel with the Arkham Knight. I'm sure if you've seen other reviews, you'll know what I'm getting at. But for those who don't, Rocksteady developers had stated up to the release of the game that the Arkham Knight was an entirely new character we'd never seen before. To which the entire internet said, it's Jason Todd, isn't it? Now, why would it be him? We haven't seen or heard about Jason by name once in any of the games. So anyways, during a hallucination in the game, we're shown Jason Todd a lot for some reason, and then you kind of figure out that Jason Todd, the previous Robin who allegedly died, is probably the Arkham Knight. And then for like a few more hours, they keep stringing you along, teasing you about who this stranger who knows everything about Batman really is. And then Sony has the gall to block my console from recording the reveal cutscene, as if it deserves to not be seen by mortal eyes. Oh yeah, quick shout out to Batman Arkham videos on YouTube. That channel has so much footage and facts about the franchise, they are absolutely necessary when talking about these games, and for putting in replacement footage when Sony won't let you record. But anyways, the reveal is that the Arkham Knight, the completely new and original character, is actually just Jason Todd, who somehow managed to survive being shot by Joker, who then went on to become some sort of military leader and works closely with the Scarecrow. Like, it's dumb. Really, really dumb. I think this is the most upset I've ever been in one of my videos, and I apologize for that, but I mean, come on. The folks writing this game really wanted to top the Clayface reveal, only to fumble the ball instead. And somehow Jason gets a redemption arc. Like, Batman grabs the boy a couple times and later he suddenly saves Batman. He gets to go scot-free even though he's responsible for countless deaths throughout the freaking game. He even gets his own story DLC where he continues to kill. Great job there, Bruce. Even after all these years, I still can't get over just how much this sucks. If they'd built up to this with prior games, it would have worked a lot better. But they didn't. You know who was built up? Scarecrow. And even though he's basically a completely different character, he still works better than the Knight ever did. And don't get me started on how disappointed I was with the boss fights. Rocksteady brought back a Deathstroke from Arkham Origins, and all they could think to do was just have him act as a reskinned tank fight. You couldn't just reuse one of the Blade enemies instead? At least the Killer Croc fight was fun, but again, that's DLC. You have to buy a DLC to get at least a decent boss fight out of the game. Okay, so spoilers are now over. With all of that said, overall, I know I sound ridiculously jaded, but that's only because I really love these games. Asylum and City are near and dear to me. I really want a Knight to be the one that completes everything I love about the franchise. But again, the Half-Life 3 comparison. I should note that I am basing everything off of my own subjective opinion, and if you love Arkham Knight with all of your heart, that's okay, because I can understand why people do. Arkham Knight is not a bad game. It has its fun moments. The tank is a neat novelty, and the city can be interesting to explore. It's one of those examples of a game that I think you should play if no other open world game really interests you, and you are craving only what an Arkham game can really provide. It still has that smooth melee combat, and the Batmobile can prove to be entertaining at times. But it's almost too long, and at times, a lot of it feels like filler. Kinda like this video, am I right? If you have a deep love for the series from a narrative standpoint, it may be a bit disappointing. If you don't know much about the series and you're a casual gamer, I think you would get a ton of mileage out of it. Arkham Knight is a massive game, and buying it on sale is an absolute bang for your buck deal, provided that you get all the DLC with it too. Again, not reviewing the story episodes, but maybe some other time. Just know that the Arkham games mean a lot to me, and while my critiques were a little harsh, I still think you should try the game out if you haven't. Batman Arkham Knight was the fastest selling game of 2015, having sold over 5 million units by October of that year. The game would receive several award nominations and win multiple awards. It made the spot on several top video game lists of all time. For all intents and purposes, the game was a success. It further solidified Rocksteady's name for the general public, but for the more engaged fans of the franchise, it definitely didn't live up to their expectations. It's divisive to some, groundbreaking to others. But what I can absolutely say is, it really was a Batman Arkham Knight. I'm never making a video this long again. Howdy folks, thank you all so much for watching this video. It was definitely a massive undertaking. I apologize for being gone for so long, but the game took me quite a while to finish, and I've never worked on a project this big before. It's all certainly new to me. I think I might take a small break from these longer form videos and go back to doing smaller reviews for a bit. I would also like to thank all 85 of you who have subscribed so far. I never thought in a million years that this many people would want to watch something I made, let alone that they would want to see more of it. If you like the video, feel free to like and subscribe. It really does help me out. And if you have any suggestions for what game, film, or show I should review next, leave a comment down below. I always love interacting with folks. With all that said, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
I'm proud of you, Dick.